Hello people! Welcome back to my channel. I've got a real treat here today. One of my favorites, the Gibson Les Paul Special. I've been playing this 2003 TV yellow version of this. This is the 59, but mine is a TV yellow, and that's exactly what the owner of this guitar wants it to be again. It was originally TV yellow. He has a picture of it from way back in the day. The story behind this guitar is that the owner of the guitar is George Lewis. His father owned this guitar, and at one point his cousin, who probably played in some bands and stuff, owned it for quite some time. At that time, it suffered a neck break, which you can see here. And when I'm done with it, there should probably be no evidence of that break. After the neck broke, they figured it would be a good idea to get rid of that yellow color. It was probably in the 80s or 90s or whatever. And I don't know if TV yellow was the coolest color back then, but it was painted with a polyurethane. And, you know, most people see this and say, hey, that looks pretty darn good for a 59. I like that color. It's all cool, all good to go. But really, when you look close at it and you are, you know, handling vintage instruments from Gibson, you just know that this isn't a Gibson finish. And we're going to get it back to a nitro finish. I'm going to strip all this old stuff off of here and also restore it back to its 3-on-a-plate vintage style buttons, which are kind of those white little buttons. Alright, let's strip her down. Let's give it a listen first before we tear it apart, you know, just in case there's a tornado or a fire or something, you know, we never get to hear it. Let's hear this thing. This is the bridge pickup. Here's a neck pickup. Here's both pickups. The bridge, and both. Let's tear it up. Here we can see the original TV yellow finish, and we can also see the original electronics really unscrewed around with. No one's desoldered anything that I can tell. It does have this problem with the braided ground wire right here. It's holding on by a thread. It is soldered, all the grounds are soldered together down here, so it is making the full circuit and going to ground, but cosmetically, you know, I don't know. I think I'd like to change out that wire, at least that one. Here we can see further proof that there have been some adjustments made over the past. Things have been desoldered and changed up a little bit. You can also, again, see the TV yellow. And there's a bit of an argument whether or not I should desolder anything, because most of it's really original. I think when they refinished it the first time, they kind of left all the electronics here. You see where it's kind of dripped down over the edge? They really didn't desolder anything at the time they refinished it because they were brushing it on with polyurethanes. I'm going to be spraying on the new finish, and I don't feel comfortable about the aerosols getting into these pots, these original pots, or anywhere around these pickups. Have a looky here. This is what I've been doing all weekend, guys. My wife went to Boston, and I've just been scraping away. See that stuff? Polyurethane. Hate it. Why'd they do this to me? Anyways, yeah, I spent the whole weekend in and out. It's really bad on the sides. You put it on, you wait a couple hours, you come out, you scrape off, you get as much off as you can, and then you put another layer on. God, I must have done like 20 in and out of the garage all weekend. It's almost done. Look how dark the wood is. I'm thinking about getting some wood bleach. It's kind of been on my grocery list for a while now. And Ian hates guitars. He mentioned using the Zinzer brand 2-part, which is what I'll go ahead and buy on Amazon. It's only $12. And man, that's been so helpful. Just, you know, I'm always wondering which product I should be experimenting with. And then someone like Ian says, you know, I've already experimented with all this stuff, and this is what I'm using, so I just use what he uses. It was a very tedious process, scraping away all that old polyurethane. It's nasty stuff. It's very durable, though, you know, for furniture. I would never recommend it on a vintage guitar. But we're going to get to refinishing this guitar. The first thing, once I get down to the bare wood, was to take care of all these old wood putty spots that they applied. When the neck broke, I don't know what happened to the wood, but it wasn't all there. We're going to break away and take a look at the cutaway just north of the neck pickup. On either side of the neck, there's 2 big spots of wood putty. This is another reason they probably wanted to paint it brown. I'm going to chip those away, but first I'm going to start plugging some holes in the headstock with some mahogany dowels. The back of the neck has a big old Elmer's wood putty spot that needs gouged out. The back's coming along. I'm doing some sanding. Here's that gouge. I took it out of a donor piece of mahogany. I pressed it in with the gel super glue. Of course, there's going to be a little sanding and scraping. Next, I whittled away those wood putty from either side of the neck in the cutaway, leaving those 2 big voids. I took a few more pieces of that mahogany and hot hide glued them into place, filed and sanded it smooth. I re-drilled the holes in the peg head for the vintage style tuners. Now I'm getting ready to spray. Now the first thing you want to do to bare wood is do a sanding sealer. I had flash coats of lacquer on hand, so I went ahead and just did a couple coats of clear lacquer and sanded with 320 grit. Your first coat in a TV yellow finish, according to Dan Earlywine's finishing step-by-step book, is a whitewash coat. Now that's white pigment mixed in with thin lacquer. I took my flash coat, you'll hear me call it a flash coat, wash coat, barrier coat. It's all the same thing. It's real thin down lacquer. It's almost 80% thinner and retarder in equal parts, plus the extra 15-20% lacquer. I took about 50 regular lacquer and 50% of the flash coat and mixed in that white wash or white pigment to make a whitewash coat. The first coat I kind of went horizontal across the guitar, and the second coat vertical. I'll just show you the first coat. We're going in horizontal passes. what I can do with the guitar hanging on a chain like that is just hold the guitar kind of sideways for my second coat. And my brush strokes will still be kind of in a horizontal, but the guitar will also be in a horizontal position. My little filter there on the fan, I ran out of 20 by 20, so I'm using a 16 by 16. That wasn't working that great, but it worked a little bit. I realized after this coat that I really needed to put on my protective gear over my arms and stuff like that. So on to the color coats. After the whitewash coat, you can take a razor blade and scrape off any raised grain, and then you take your leftover white and mix in some amber and maybe a very minute amount of red if you want to warm up the color a little bit, make it more of an orange and not such a pale yellow. But as I started off, it was just kind of a pale yellow, you'll see. I took about 25 drops of vintage amber translucent dye, about 10 drops of lemon yellow, and about 8 drops of Kalamazoo mahogany, which is a reddish brown. And we start spraying that on here in a moment. I'll start talking about the grain filler right now. After this first yellowish coat, I think it's good to spray a couple barrier coats, thin barrier coats, just so that the grain or pore filler doesn't smudge into the color so much, so that you don't wipe off any of the color as you're trying to clean up the pore filler. That step is not in the book, but I wanted to add that step. I think it's a good step to add. If you're sloppy with pore filler like I am, I haven't done that much of it, and I experienced a little smudging in the cutaways especially. I'm not going to show the grain filling process, but for the grain filler I mixed in a little Kalamazoo brown and amber, more to the Kalamazoo mahogany brown, a little less of the amber than in my clear coats. Once I was finished with all the color coats and the grain filler, I decided that my first couple clear coats I was going to add more amber, because it was more of a banana yellow, and I was shooting for more of a orangish yellow. You'll see in the original picture of the guitar, I'll show that here after this clip. You'll see George's cousin standing here with the guitar. Looks a lot like I looked when I was about 20 years old. So back to the color coats. It looked a little banana yellow to me, so I added a bunch of amber to my clear coats. About 35 drops of amber to 1 drop of red. And that was in 6 ounces of lacquer. Looks like Kodak film. So the first couple coats of my clear coat had the amber in it. After I had it about the right color, I thought I would just go straight up clear coats for about 7-8 coats, and then I finished it off with a real flat coat of Mohawk. If you remember back at in the first couple minutes of this video, that one of the lead wires wasn't long enough, so they had everything kind of soldered together. All the ground wires were kind of soldered together at the very end of this neck lead wire. I'm deciding to desolder the lead wire and give it a brand new lead wire. This pickup's 60 years old, but it's going to have a brand new lead wire that's long enough to reach the volume pot. Somehow it got shortened, but I decided there's going to be no more funny stuff with this guitar. It's worth replacing. I had a couple new lead wires sitting right here in a drawer that had been sitting here for a year. I never got to use them, so here we go. We attach the lead or hot wire first, and then the braided part is part of the ground, and the blue wire is going to be attached to that same post. I put a little heat shrink tubing over the area of the first connection, and as you see right here, it's starting to melt. It's starting to shrink. That's kind of neat to see. The solder made it shrink. But I'll get the heat gun out and shrink it the rest of the way. First, though, I take the multimeter and test the resistance of the pickup at several points. I'm going to do this to make sure I didn't goof up and disconnect something. So reattach both wires, and I get a reading of 8.3 K ohms. Can you see? That's 8,300 or whatever, 83,000. Okay, little heat gun action. Shrink that tube. Protect that lead wire. In the left upper corner of the route, you can see that there's kind of a right angle there. That was a mistake. I should have made that round. And what I found out here is that those two little new pieces of mahogany that I put in on either side of the fingerboard were a little too big. I couldn't get the pickup to fit in there right away. I had to get the Dremel out with a little diamond bit and kind of reshape those two pieces. And I had to use a little filler in that corner to get a radius to it. I used epoxy putty with lemon yellow stain, and it almost already matched perfectly to the TV yellow color. That was pure luck. These little washers are called rip your hand apart pointers, I heard. All original pots, one new lead wire, and all original capacitors, the original output jack. Very cool. I think it's even the original knobs. So this guitar is really restored back to its original form in almost every way. It's got the original plastics, original hardware, original electronics. It even has the original frets. It really needs a new fret job. Maybe he'll come back in a couple months. I just noticed how grubby this is. That's part of the cool factor, I guess. The grubby switch tip. Oh man, that's grubby. That's one grubby switch. Let's see. I gotta get me a grubby switch on my guitar to make it cool. I pulled this little wrench out the other day when someone was over, and he's like, "Hey man, that's really cool. I gotta get me one of those." And I was like, "Hell yeah." I think it's called a spanner wrench. You can tighten and loosen. It actually fits underneath the knobs if you want to tighten your pot without pulling the knob. This big old screwdriver is what you need if you don't want to screw up your bushings. Everybody's always screwed those up trying to use a regular screwdriver. That regular screwdriver is just not big enough. There's them original electronics right there. Look at that long lead wire that's on that neck pickup now. We'll just hide it under this plastic plate so that no one can see it. But it's nice to have that lead wire the proper length. That was really the only thing I found wrong with the electronics. A little funkiness on the ground. But it's going to sound so beefy. I plugged it in and I had some other music going in the room, and I could just tell from playing my Paul Reed Smith, and I plugged this thing in, and the bass response was just overwhelming. It's just got so much low end. If you played in a band with one of these guitars, you'd probably barely need a bass player, but you know, you need a bass player. Okay, so there's the serial number. George finally found out what it was, and he gave me a call. I colored the buttons, and then I decided to take the color off. So they were a little too yellow. Here it is. Beware, kids, this guitar has more balls than any modern guitar could ever have. Lots of bass. Love this thing. Thanks for tuning in.